Hello and welcome to Another Day, Another Evil. I'm your host Georgina.
And I'm Melissa, and this week it's my turn to look, again, at an unsolved case. 75,000 children are reported missing in the UK every year. Of those, 79% are found within 24 hours and 90% are found within 2 days. Less than 2% of children are missing for longer than a week. But what happens if your child is one of those 2%? Someone who remains missing and you have no answers for a year or two? What about when a decade has gone by, or two? Daniel Entwistle was 7 years old when he went missing in 2003. 23 years later, he has never been found and there is still no evidence as to what happened to him. So let's have a look today. This episode deals with the case of a missing child and makes mentions of paedophilia. Listener discretion is always advised. Before we start, I need to note that this is a case which seems to have had little reported, other than the really basic facts, and much of that is conflicting. I've found one documentary and only a couple of Reddit threads containing theories, which mostly all conclude the same thing. Daniel Entwistle was the middle child of 3 children to his parents Paula and David Entwistle. He had been born in Burnley in Lancashire, but the family had moved to Great Yarmouth around 3 years prior to his disappearance in 2003. At the time of his disappearance, Daniel was 7 years old and had been attending Great Acres First and Middle School. His class teacher, Martin Fuller, said of Daniel, quote, "He loved drawing and making models and working on the computer, and he loved talking to the class, telling them the things he had found out and showing them things he had brought to school. He took a great interest in the world and he would have a good understanding of the news. He would ask questions in science and he would be the one who was asking questions and would explore and want to find out more. He was very inquiring." He was described by his mum as, quote, "outgoing and pleasant," and she said that, quote, "he can be mischievous like a lot of children and was a loner, but would say hi to anybody." Speaking later in a documentary, his head teacher, Keith Eggleton, said he had always seemed quite happy and close to his mum. However, it seemed that Daniel perhaps didn't have as rosy a home life as was pictured to the outside world. Journalists who covered this case at the time apparently found out that Daniel was either on the at-risk register or was at least known by social services. The at-risk register, which is now known as a child protection plan for those outside the UK, is basically a list of children compiled and maintained by the local authorities' social services who are deemed to be suffering from, or at least risk of suffering from, harm or abuse. The idea is that all official bodies who come into contact with children, such as schools or doctors, will be aware, and the social services team work closely with them and the parents to prevent harm to the child. So if this is the case, I'm not entirely sure why the head teacher of the school wouldn't be aware of this if he was on the at-risk register. But like I said, it kind of came out in this documentary that I watched that the journalists at the time uncovered this. So yeah, lots of conflicting information.
Yeah, that seems really strange that if he was on it, surely the whole idea of the at-risk register is the fact that the school would have known.
Yeah.
But we have obviously seen in cases before that it has fallen short and there have been issues with it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the first case where the head teacher might not have known.
No, that's true.
But yeah, you would think...
Yeah, I was thinking, particularly in a primary school, from my understanding, head teachers would definitely be aware of those kind of children because they wouldn't necessarily have the pastoral type of care that a secondary school would have, where you would have the pastoral team who deal with that over kind of the head as such.
Yeah, and I guess obviously we're coming at it from an idea of our primary school was very small, whereas I imagine there are ones out there that are bigger.
Yeah, and I'm coming at it from a perspective as a secondary school teacher who taught in the 2020s rather than, the late 2010s and early 2020s as opposed to back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, but I guess in 2003, you'd have been a very similar age to Daniel.
Yeah,
a year older?
2. You'd have been a year younger than I was, 2 years older.
Yeah, so, like, I guess coming at it from that point of view, I mean, obviously we were younger and stuff, so maybe our parents would know a bit more, but...
We definitely had kids who would have been on those registers, and it was... I think it was even well known amongst us who those kids were.
Yeah, not necessarily as being on the register and like that terminology, but you kind of knew the more problemed children as such.
Definitely. So yeah, not entirely sure, just as a disclaimer, not entirely sure whether this is true or not, that it's something that came up in my research that the journalists had uncovered, but it's not been confirmed by any official bodies.
Yeah, definitely good to note there, I guess.
Yeah. And a neighbour of Daniel's later said that he was often seen wandering the streets on his own and spending time at the beach on his own because he didn't want to return home. He was also seemingly bullied by his peers, which of course at that age makes life even harder, especially when there's no safe refuge at home. So let's take a little detour and speak about the area that he was living at the time. So Great Yarmouth is a seaside town in Norfolk on the east coast of England. Both in 2003 when Daniel went missing and still today, it's a place with high unemployment rates, a high number of low-income families and low educational achievement. It's also located just 1 mile from the country's largest offshore energy industry, and combined with being a seaside town, this makes the area have a high transient population. Obviously this makes tracking people down to speak to about a missing child very difficult. Alongside this transient population, Great Yarmouth was also, seemingly, a magnet for sex offenders. Now, I think we briefly mentioned this when we discussed the case of Robert Black, but when they were searching for Caroline Hogg, who was the 5-year-old who went missing in the seaside town of Portobello in Edinburgh, they came across a high number of sex offenders in this area, and this is unfortunately seemingly no accident. Seaside towns attract paedophiles and sex offenders because there are usually lots of children and young people around who are often allowed perhaps more freedom than in other types of busy cities. They can often be found in the amusements, unaccompanied by their parents, or at least not always directly in the parents' gaze, and obviously people tend to have the guard down more when they're on holiday.
Yeah, I mean, 100%, and I guess that in seaside towns, when you're on holiday, like you don't think about all the bad things. You're on holiday, you think about all the good things, so you're not thinking about all the bad things that could be happening. And I guess seaside towns, you obviously see a lot more younger people dressed in, the swimming costumes and everything. So I can understand why it attracts sex offenders to the area, because you potentially don't actually have to do anything to get that kick.
And it wouldn't be odd for them to be using cameras to be taking photos.
No.
Because it's quite easy if you're on a crowded beach to look like you're taking a picture of whatever.
Well, yeah, how many times do we, if we're out somewhere and we see something funny, pretend to be taking a selfie and we're actually taking a picture of somebody else because they're dressed in a weird costume or whatever. And
I mean, even back in the day when mobile phones weren't kind of used as frequently, and having an actual physical camera, you wouldn't do that in a non-touristy place as such.
No.
But you definitely wouldn't think twice seeing somebody with a camera taking a picture of anything at the seaside.
Even just the beach, it wouldn't be weird to have somebody take a picture where there's lots of kids in it and not actually taking a picture of themselves or seemingly of anybody.
Yeah.
Like, how many people do you see taking pictures of the sea or whatever? So
that's it. Like, so I it's really sad that is the case, but it makes sense. And obviously, you do have your guard down when you're on holiday. I mean, think about that time when we went on holiday and we
just got left.
Got chatting to that little girl and her family in the jewellers, and Mum and Dad just left us there with them.
Yeah, Mum and Dad will never live that down from us.
No, I know. It's a good job that nothing happened to us. Can you imagine the kind of criticism that people like us would be laying on them?
Yeah.
And it's just so easy.
Yeah, it is. It's just so easy to...
I mean, how far did they get before they were like, oh shit, what have we done?
Yeah. I mean, I seem to remember being there a while, but Mum and Dad seem to think that they literally walked down the road, but I think that they're maybe wrong in remembering that.
Yeah, we were definitely there a little while. Whether they realised sooner and then kind of talked themselves out of that fear, maybe.
Yeah, because they were going to just go for a drink or something, and the woman was like, oh, they're quite happily playing with my daughter. Like, that could have been anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that wouldn't happen. They wouldn't have done that to us back at home, but just that different atmosphere of being on holidays completely
totally different.
Changes your perspective of things. You are less suspicious because you feel like you are safe, so...
Yeah. You don't think that something like that is going to happen on your holiday.
No, of course.
You go on a holiday to have a good time.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like the whole saying of, it doesn't happen in our town, is even bigger. It doesn't happen on holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. So, not to terrify any of our listeners who might have children, but just be wary if you're at the seaside with them that there might be a large number of pedos in that area. So, on Saturday the 3rd of May 2003, it was a bank holiday weekend, and Daniel was seen playing, or at least interacting with, several boys near Trinity Quay at around 3:30 or 4 p.m. He was then sent to the local shop, Blenco's convenience store, to run an errand for one of his parents. As with everything in this case, I've seen quite a lot of conflicting information. So in some reports, his mother Paula, who suffers from epilepsy, was asleep, and it was his father who sent him. But in one report I saw, it said that it was his mother who sent him. But regardless of that, he was sent to the shop, and he was captured on CCTV at 5:05 p.m. in that shop. This image of him captured on CCTV, once it became known that he was missing, was released to the media. And it is, despite being quite grainy, it's quite clearly Daniel. There's no kind of arguments about whether it is or isn't. Like, this is definitely a confirmed sighting. Yeah. And on the footage, he was seen wearing a blue Adidas shirt with striped sleeves and an Adidas logo on the chest. And he was also wearing blue sweatpants and grey shoes. He then returned home safely, and apparently here he asked his dad if he could go back out on his bike to play outside, and his dad said yes. And then apparently it's either when his mum woke up from her sleep or when he didn't return home for tea that his parents became concerned. They then enlisted the help of neighbours to search nearby, and then when they couldn't find him, they contacted police, and that was within an hour of his parents growing concerned.
Yeah.
So before I tell you about the investigation, much has been made around the fact that he was allowed to be playing outside on his own at 7, and I'm not too sure how odd that would be in the early 2000s, given that I would have been 9 and you would have been 6. We were definitely allowed to be outside with friends. And I know that some of my...
You always have like a perimeter as well, don't you? Like, don't go past the end of the street. I always remember that being a big thing.
I was going to say that was our rule. And I know some of my friends, their parents had slightly less strict rules because they were allowed to come to ours. And that was definitely within that kind of age range. So I don't think that's... I suppose it depends on that perimeter that they were allowing. But I know a lot of people have been... A lot of comments are made about how it's completely absurd, and I just don't personally think that a 7-year-old being out and about in the early 2000s was weird. We were definitely out and about.
Yeah, and I guess it depends though as well, doesn't it? Because like we're coming at it from a point where we had a fair few friends within the kind of village. Yeah. So we would always be either playing with each other as sisters or playing with our friends. So yes, it might be weird by like viewing it as just like this little boy who's 7 and so small playing by himself. Yeah. People could view that as weird. I can kind of see the idea of being out and about by yourself. Yeah. Whereas if you're in like a bit of a group, it was maybe a little bit more lax, and we're viewing it from that standpoint.
Yeah. But I mean, if he's told his parents he wanted to go play with his friends,
and out on your bike, and we were definitely playing out at that age.
Yeah, and I think the kind of difference between now and then is tremendous in terms of kind of safety and child protection.
Yeah.
Like, we were still in that kind of weird in-betweeny type phase where you kind of weren't allowed to hit your kids, but you still were, and it wasn't...
The early noughties. I thought I said 90s, but I did say noughties. Yeah. The early noughties were a weird time for parents. I can imagine it was
like stranger danger was very much a thing, but also
very much it still didn't happen in your area.
Yeah, and it was still very much I don't know if it's placing onus on the child as such, but you were drilled into the stranger danger, but you weren't necessarily restricted with what you were allowed to do in the sense, in comparison to kids today that you see where they just don't leave the house.
Yeah.
Until they're at least like in their teens, because it's just not okay.
Yeah.
There has to be adult supervision all the time.
Yeah.
And kind of, I think I think when I've been coming across all this comments, I'm like, I can see both sides.
I think even now, though, kids go play out.
Yeah.
With the same rules that we provided. So, like, I really don't think even nowadays, maybe at 7 years old, maybe that is quite young.
Yeah.
I feel like the difference between 6 and 7 seems like such a big age. Because when you were like, you were 6, I was like, oh God, I can't imagine being allowed to play out. But I probably was. I'm like, I don't know, that just seems like a really big age jump when it probably isn't.
Yeah, no, it's just, I think a lot's been made out of this, and I don't necessarily think that it was too uncommon, as particularly in that type of area with the deprivation levels that there were in Great Yarmouth.
Yeah.
But I think it's just important to be aware of that, and
also putting it into the time that it was.
We need to put it into context, and even though there was a lot more awareness in the early noughties, I still don't think it was to the levels that they are today.
No.
And I still think children had more freedoms than they do today.
Yeah.
But then as well, it is a case of how far was he actually allowed? If it's a seaside town, like, there's varying scopes, and I've not looked at a map to see kind of where he was and where he was allowed and things.
Yeah, and I guess at this point anyway, I don't know where he went missing from. We might know that, we might not. But like you say, and as well, you could say, but you're only allowed to the end of the street. How many people went further than what they were allowed?
Exactly.
We definitely did.
Yeah.
And just hoped to God that we didn't get caught and told off about it.
Yeah, and that was your biggest concern.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah, you weren't worried about somebody taking you. You were worried about what trouble you were going to get in at home for it.
Definitely. So important to note, but how much stock you can place, or how much blame you can place into that is another thing entirely. Thankfully, the police took his disappearance seriously from the start. Which could be interesting, actually. Sorry to butt in here, but that could be interesting in terms of you saying that he was on like the at-risk register. That the police did take it serious from the start, because how many times do we hear it that they ran away? And like, that wouldn't have been so bizarre. No.
To think it'd have happened if he was on this register and his home life was that bad.
That's true. I never actually considered that.
So it's
because as well, he had gone missing in the past. I don't know whether it involved the police at that stage when he had gone missing, but he turned up 2 hours later, kind of not far from where he'd left his bike when he was out playing.
Yeah. So that, we are very quick to blame the police and judge the police for not taking things seriously. So it's really good here.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was like quite a key thing to say
definitely.
as well with that.
With that factor that I'd not considered, because of what I was going to say is that actually the unsolved cases that we've covered so far, and I know we've not done many yet on this podcast, but everyone that we have done, the police have taken the disappearances seriously, and you don't always hear that. And then, like you say, particularly in this context, having been at risk, and it's easy to write them off as runaways or, well, it's a child that doesn't matter. So, very interesting. So, they took it seriously and they began a large-scale search of the area using helicopters, sniffer dogs and divers. Missing persons posters were put up, and Daniel's parents made a public plea for information in a press conference alongside the police. And his mum said, quote, "Daniel, if you are watching this, please come home. You are not in trouble, please come home." In the early hours of Sunday the 4th of May, Daniel's red and white BMX bike was found close to the river and Trinity Quay, where he'd been seen earlier in the afternoon of the 3rd. This led many to think that he'd maybe fallen into the river and drowned, so the police searched the water with sonar, and obviously they had the divers out, but there were no results. And that bike is the only piece of evidence ever found in relation to Daniel's disappearance. And still, 23 years later, nothing else has ever turned up. So, as I already mentioned, Great Yarmouth was a magnet for sex offenders. And in the area at the time, 5 paedophiles who were known to the police were living close to Daniel's home. Each of these was interviewed, but nothing ever came from it. After 2 months of searches and the investigation, police had followed over 2,500 tips. They took statements from over 500 people. And after 2 months, the investigation was scaled back and the search for Daniel was stopped. Detective Superintendent Julian Gregory said, quote, "On the investigation side, we are still going on, but as we conclude lines of inquiry, we scale back accordingly." And this is roughly where the investigation ends. So, exactly 4 years to the date after Daniel's disappearance, another child, whose name you'll definitely know, went missing. And that child is Madeleine McCann. And as you can imagine, many comparisons between the two have been made, particularly around the fact that Madeleine came from a more privileged upbringing. Her parents were both doctors, whereas Daniel's parents were struggling. His mum struggled to work due to her epilepsy, and his dad was a railway worker. And in 2014, Daniel's dad said that Madeleine's parents received, quote, "favouritism" over the campaign to find their daughter. And it's not hard to see why you might feel like that. However, I can appreciate that privilege does play into this. How many times do we see that people of colour or different ethnic backgrounds, people from different income backgrounds, they get less media, less attention, less public knowledge than pretty white people?
Yeah.
Pretty white women, particularly, if we're talking about adult missing cases.
Yeah. Or even kids.
Yeah.
Young, pretty little girls that you like.
Yeah.
The poster child of that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Madeleine McCann is the poster child of missing children.
Yeah.
If you say name a missing child, I bet you 99.9% of people say that, especially specifically in the UK, but probably even further afield.
Yeah. And so it's important to recognise that. I don't think it would be fair to say that somebody's child getting more attention is a bad thing. It's you need to reframe your thinking, and it's the child getting, or the missing person getting less attention. That's the bad thing.
Yes.
Because every child or every missing person should be treated equally, and everybody should get the full resources that such as Madeleine McCann got.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important when we're discussing things like this to recognise that privilege does play a role, but also their privilege isn't a bad thing. It's the lack of resources given to the underprivileged. Yes. That is the problem.
Yes.
Rather than blaming the people who do get the attention, you need to blame the people who are not given the attention to the other cases.
100%, yeah. And I guess all the cases are different, and obviously we're not going to the Madeleine McCann case now.
No.
but obviously they might have had bigger leads or more. Obviously, you're gonna go into Daniel's disappearance, but he did get a lot of attention, and he did get a lot put into it, and it's not fair to say that he didn't, because he had thousands of tips, statements from over 500 people. Like, I imagine a lot of money was put into that as well.
It was apparently reported when they stopped the search that they'd already spent £300,000.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that equates to in today's money, but it's obviously still a significant chunk.
A fair chunk of money.
Yeah.
But, like...
And they took it seriously.
And it might have just been the fact that...
Sadly, leads dry up.
And Madeleine McCann's might have had more leads, so it had more attention on it for longer.
Yeah.
So you can't compare them like for like, because they are
different cases.
They're different cases.
Yeah.
So he's obviously coming at it from a we didn't get as much as they did, but he doesn't necessarily know why.
No. So, yeah. I just wanted to highlight that because every time you see this case in the majority of reporting, Madeleine McCann's case is brought up because it happened exactly 4 years later.
Yeah.
And obviously there are really easy parallels to make between the privilege of Madeleine McCann compared to the underprivilege of Daniel.
Yeah.
And it's sad.
It is.
But yeah, important to discuss that, I think.
And regardless of that, there's still 2 missing children.
Yeah.
They're still both missing.
Yeah.
We still don't know what happened to either of them. Which
depending
is
on
why this is an unsolved case, unfortunately. Yeah. I'm not providing a spoiler there for anybody.
Depending on whether the Epstein file releases, we're not going to go into that, but 2 missing children still.
Maybe we'll go into that if we do Madeleine McCann one day. That might have to be like a full 4-parter episode.
I know. I don't even know where to start with that. But anyways. So, whilst there hasn't been much news on Daniel's case since the search was stopped, which was 2 months after it began.
Yeah. So that's...
July 2003.
August 2003, yeah.
So, whilst there's not been much news since then, there is something which has come up which may or may not be related. So, in 2015, Daniel's dad, David, died from natural causes. And after this, it came to light that he was in fact a convicted paedophile. And having served, and this sentence will fucking piss you right off like it did me when I saw it, but he served 6 months in jail for, quote, having sex, which of course means raping, a 12-year-old girl in 1987. And given that this had happened prior to 1997, he was never on the sex offenders register. He was, however, interviewed by the police in relation to his disappearance, but he has never been, we'll just clarify that, he's never been considered to be a suspect or even a person of interest.
And I understand why it's key to kind of maybe note that here. However, you do find that people who have paedophilic tendencies tend to go for the same kind of age group or same sex. So the fact that this was a 12-year-old girl maybe doesn't really have much significance in the fact that that Daniel is then obviously a 7-year-old boy. People do tend to have, I think like this I am not a expert in this at all, but from kind of what you hear, people tend to keep the same profile and preference in their paedophilic tendencies and don't tend to cross.
Yeah. And it is important to know this, and this theory seems to be kind of that his father was involved in it. seems to be like the leading theory when you look at the few kind of Reddit threads and kind of what is out there in the easily accessed public domain, like not behind paywalls and stuff. And it's certainly the one that, during the documentary that I watched, that kind of was the conclusion that they came to, that his father was involved in a paedophile ring and was therefore involved in Daniel's disappearance. However, I personally do not feel like there is enough evidence for this. I think
that is complete speculation based on the fact that he was in a paedophile ring.
Which we don't even
based
know.
On the fact that he, I take that back.
A conviction.
Is convicted of paedophilia.
Yeah. So, this conviction was in 1987, and that's 16 years before Daniel went missing, and there was nothing kind of since 1987, nothing after that, and I know that that could just be a case of that he's not been caught.
Yeah.
But his two other children, remember, there was Daniel was the middle child.
Yeah.
His two other children have never come forward, never said anything. He was separated from Daniel's mother not long after Daniel had gone missing, and she's never come out and said anything. And I personally think that if he was involved, I don't think he would have been able to hide it. I just feel like that personally, to me, does not feel particularly realistic, in the sense that there were 3 other people in that house who lived in that house. Where would he have gone? Kind of what would have happened? Why not the other 2 children? I think Daniel was relatively close in age to his siblings. There wasn't a massive...
Yeah, I don't think that there's enough information to come to that conclusion. Like, the police didn't consider him a suspect.
No.
In which they obviously would have known that he had a previous conviction.
Yeah. That's it. They knew he had a conviction. They just didn't release it to the public.
And I can understand why as well, actually, that they didn't.
Because this would happen.
Because it would have ended up in like this big thing that potentially they might have just had the conversation with David and interrogated him and whatever, and decided no, it has no kind of meaning within this case, and it could have really taken away from Daniel's disappearance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can understand why there's the theory there.
Yeah.
But it seems ridiculous to be the prevailing, like the most...
Yeah, that's definitely...
the biggest theory.
Seems to be the one that I've come across the most in terms of, his father was a paedophile, so therefore this is involved, despite the fact there's no evidence. Well, there's nothing out there apart from that suggests that he ever interfered with his children, kind of nothing else. So I personally do not think this particular has much weight to it.
No. And as a theory, I guess, when any child goes missing, the parents are always the first to be suspected. It's like when somebody dies, you always look at the people closest to them, so their partner, their friends, their family. Yeah. You look into that inner circle first. So it being a theory isn't bizarre. No. Plus then having this conviction does make it a theory, and hey, it could be that.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I'm not saying that it's not, but we obviously don't know.
What we know, and everything you've looked at so far and told us, it doesn't make sense to be the biggest theory.
No. And I think that leads us into one of the other theories that's out there. Obviously, you said that the people closest to a child are the people responsible. Yeah. Obviously, one of the other theories is the exact opposite, that a stranger abducted him. And given what we know about Great Yarmouth, obviously it has a highly transient population. There were a lot of paedophiles and sex offenders in the area. could potentially hold weight. Obviously, statistically, it's the least likely, but also it is still a statistic. It's just
people still do get taken by strangers.
Somebody has to be that tiny percent.
Yeah, and it would make sense within this case, with it being in such a transient area, like, and the fact that there isn't any more information been found or any more evidence. Like you said, the only piece of evidence was the bike, didn't you? So, like, that then would make sense, because if that has been somebody just picking them up off the street, picking Daniel up off of the street and leaving with him, one, would that really get noticed?
Exactly.
I think we've spoken a few of the cases before, probably my Robert Black one, where if you have a child screaming or making a scene, you don't necessarily notice that.
No.
You might just think it's their mum or their dad.
Yeah.
And especially given kind of the population and it being a bit more of a rundown area, you might not necessarily know all your neighbours, so his mum, and especially if, you know, his dad might have been working all the time, which he said, you know, he was working, and his mum had epilepsy, so she might not leave the house that much, so they might not associate Daniel with his parents, so if he'd have been picked up, not necessarily would have been that bizarre that nobody noticed.
No. And I think given the transient population, it's very easy, not easy, if you get out of the area and then take him away.
The police forces, especially in 2003, maybe wouldn't have...
Yeah, maybe not quite as joined up, and if you then killed Daniel and disposed of his body in a remote area in the UK, there's no reason why it would get found.
Yeah, not get found, nor, if it has been found, necessarily being linked to Daniel being this missing person.
No.
Because he didn't go missing in that area.
No. So, I kind of,
that feels more realistic than his dad dealt with him within this paedophile ring. That seems more realistic given the space and time that it was in.
Yeah, and to me, this one, like you say, does feel more realistic than his father, just given kind of the evidence that they do have and the amount of evidence that they don't have.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, because you'd think that if it was his dad, there would be some sort of evidence somewhere in the house or in his car or in something you would... If that had have happened, the evidence would be there.
Yeah.
I know that obviously in 2003 evidence wasn't as well found and analysed and everything as it is today.
But we still had DNA, that still was a thing in 2003, and that kind of era was kind of the beginning of a lot of the true crime kind of narrative TV shows that kind of popularised forensics. And so people would have likely been aware or starting to be aware. So for the police to have not found anything, given you would expect, given the scale of the search, I would think if it was his dad or his mum who had anything to do with it, they would have found something at their house.
Yeah.
Because he was seen on CCTV at 5 p.m. and by 8 p.m. his parents had reported him missing.
Yeah.
That feels like a very narrow time window to have carted him off to a paedophile ring without being noted or killed him. It feels very narrow to me. You'd at least give it until the next day, surely.
Yeah, because... And you wouldn't report him missing and have all of this attention brought on to you if you'd have...
I mean, people do. Because you have to. Yeah. But it was a bank holiday weekend. They could have easily left it until the Tuesday before school would have realised.
Yeah. And being like, well, we thought that we needed to wait this long because that wasn't...
Yeah, we thought we had to wait 48 hours.
Yeah, how many times do you hear that? Well, and I know that was maybe more significant in the US.
Yeah.
And in cases in the US, but still, it's still like a thing you wait.
Yeah.
You have to wait a while. It wasn't known as much in 2003 that the first, is it 72 hours are the most important, so like surely they could have easily left it.
Yeah, definitely.
And it maybe wouldn't have even been questioned.
No.
Well, we thought he was out with friends and, you know, he said that he was staying at so-and-so's house.
Yeah.
Who's going to say that he didn't say that?
Exactly. Or we thought we heard him come in.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
Then
or like
the next morning, no.
If his mum, you know, his mum has epilepsy, she slept through, his dad went off to work, whatever, like...
Yeah.
They didn't have to report him missing
for him.
It seems that would be bringing a hell of a lot of attention onto yourself if you had something to do with it.
Yeah.
Especially given that it was bank holiday weekend and realistically it wouldn't have been that bizarre for...
Yeah. A child to have been out past 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Even the age that he was. Like, it still would have been. Yeah. So, that takes us then to kind of the final theory. And that's, of course, that Daniel fell into the river and drowned. And this became really kind of popular given the location of where his bike was found, which was near to the river on the quay. And this actually is what his parents think happened. So, speaking in 2023, Paula said, quote, "It's not a big mystery. The police showed me CCTV of him riding his bike across the garage forecourt towards the quay, and he didn't come out again. I'm sure he went into that river." And I think this is probably the most likely. I know they searched the river, they used sonar, they used divers, but that river was deep in a lot of areas. Yeah. If you've missed kind of... If you went into the sweet spot in the river and just got taken out to sea, then that's quite... That would explain why there's no clothing found, why there's no body, why nothing kind of came from that.
Yeah, and I know that with like sonar and divers, you have to be so thorough, and it is very much, you do it like step by step by step by step. And I mean, I don't know what it was like in 2003, nor do I know what it's like now, but it's not just take a real big snapshot of it, is it? It is, you go up and down the river in these tiny, tiny movements to capture everything. Yeah.
And he was a child, like he was 7 years old, he wasn't big by any means.
No.
He was only small, he was only slight.
And to be taken by a current that would have happened in a river.
Yeah.
It's not like a little canal or a stream, it is a river that has a current.
Yeah.
Like, we all know if you've been in the sea or...
how easy it is to get swept up in that, definitely.
And even, you know, in those wave machines in swimming baths, like, they have such a pull when you are little.
Yeah, definitely. And
that's not a bizarre thing to think.
No. And he was reported to be quite scared of the water. I read that in one of my sources.
So probably panicked.
Yeah. And then some of the reports say that he was potentially pushed. Obviously, he was being bullied. Yeah. I don't believe that one, because I think if there was other children involved, somebody would have said something.
You would hope. So, and you would think that one person, especially 23 years on now, would have come forward and gone,
actually,
this is what happened.
Yeah. To not
So
I don't personally think that the kind of bullying angle pans out. Not for me anyways. That whole he got pushed into the river, or it was an accident by kind of been bullied. Like, obviously a child that's at 7 years old, they're not criminally responsible, they don't know the cause of their actions, they know something bad's happened, but that doesn't hold much weight for me. I think it's more likely that he went in on his own. He didn't willingly go into the river on his own, but he probably fell in by accident.
Yeah.
And I think that does kind of hold some weight.
Yeah. I do find it weird that nothing has ever turned up, even if that was the case, just with bodies surface.
Yeah.
Bodies that have been weighed down surface.
Yeah.
Because of decomposition in the air and everything, and I'm not going to go into that. Or like clothes come off.
Yeah.
And I find it very strange that nothing has come up. But again, if it's taken you far enough out, the ocean terrifies me.
Yeah.
I love it. I'm not scared of it, but it terrifies me, the fact that we don't know the majority.
Yeah. We know more about space than we do in the deepest depths of the ocean.
Like, it is terrifying. So it isn't bizarre, but I think that surely it couldn't have been taken that far out for nothing.
I think this is the thing with this case. There's no evidence apart from that bike, and like, we don't know what came from the bike, whether they did any analysis on it, whether they got fingerprints. We don't know anything of that. Kind of what I've told you is what
you don't know whether he left it there, whether
it was put there as a red herring.
Taken from him if he was being bullied. That's a nice bike. I'll fucking have that.
Yeah.
And then left somewhere. He might not have even been with his bike at the time that he went missing.
Yeah, a lot of people have speculated that if it was the paedophile ring or stranger abduction, they've put it next to the river to make it look like that. So I think any of these theories could be true, and just as easily, kind of, none of them could be.
It could be something totally different, though. We don't know.
So new leads have been followed by the police over the years, but we're still no closer to finding Daniel 23 years later. So if you know anything about the disappearance of Daniel Entwistle, you are urged to contact the police directly, or you can contact Crime Stoppers anonymously, and we'll leave details in our show notes. So thank you for listening to the case of Daniel Entwistle.
Stay safe.
Goodbye. All episodes are written and presented by Melissa and Georgina Scora.
Editing is by Vicky Hunter.
All of our sources can be found in our show notes or on our website.
Take care.
Stay safe out there.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.